In 1692, the small town of Salem Village became the home of one of America's oldest mysteries. Girls became sick, and their illnesses were blamed on witchcraft. From that point on, fear took over and a witch hunt began. What makes you afraid?
Things that makes me worried are probably not having my assignments and
not knowing what's going to happen, not having control over certain situations. When I was 4, I was scared to go to the doctor because I was scared to get shots.
When I was younger and I was home alone, it was really windy outside, making noises, and I was really afraid, so I called my mom and had her come home.
When there's any one-on-ones or breakaways, when it's just the other person in the ball coming at me, there's a slight fear, I guess, that I have.
I guess what scares me is mostly probably being alone, not having my friends with me, knowing that my parents would be there for me.
Being like humiliated, probably, in front of like lots of people.
Knowing I'm getting in trouble. That just gives me that cold feeling.
Massachusetts, 1692. 20 people are executed. Their accusers are children. The crime? Witchcraft. 300 years later, it remains one of America's most murderous secrets. What caused an entire village to go mad?
It's important to keep the gloves on because it's a very poisonous substance.
Get inside the mind of madness.
This place is creepy.
Discover the secret truth behind the terror.
What we have here is a 300-year-old political cover-up.
The terror that was the Salem Witch Trials. In a North Carolina chemistry lab, a pharmacologist is attempting to solve a mystery buried in America's past. He's on the trail of a secret villain, one that could be responsible for a year-long reign of terror. The Salem Witch Trials. In the depth of winter in 1692, a few adolescent girls in Massachusetts began acting strangely. They went into convulsions, claiming to see frightening visions. Under questioning, the girls said witchcraft was to blame. Then they named those who were bewitching them. Within weeks, 3 suspected witches were in jail. Before the year ended, 150 people had been accused. 3 died in jail, and 20 people were executed. The epicenter of this spate of hysteria was a small village 5 miles north of Salem in a town now called Danvers. At the time, it was known as Salem Village. Only one house directly connected with the witch trials still stands.
Behind me is the Rebecca Nurse homestead, one of those houses built and lived in during the 17th century and home of one of the witchcraft victims.
Rebecca Nurse, an upstanding member of the village, was accused of being a witch and hanged on July 19, 1692. The origin of the accusations lies half a mile away and is now an archaeological site. Town archivist Richard Trask has spent more than 3 decades examining primary source documents to chronicle the witchcraft epidemic.
Sometime in probably January, very early February, several children living in the Samuel Paris household at the parsonage started going into convulsions or some kind of fits.
The parish children first accused Tituba, a Caribbean family servant known to practice non-Christian religion. Tituba was a predictable target of Puritan accusation. But soon, cases of convulsions and accused witches spread throughout the county, and more citizens were caught up in the madness. Even a Reverend, George Burroughs, a man of God, was accused of consorting with the devil. The governor of the state of Massachusetts stood by while the sentences were carried out. Whatever judicial system was in place failed. The reasons and underlying motives for this failure have baffled historians for over 300 years. We do know one thing. The Salem Witch Trials were a shocking miscarriage of justice in American history. No evidence, no law, no justice.
The person accusing the witch presented evidence that only he or she could see, the apparitions or the specters of the witches hurting them. And suddenly the girls would start biting their own lips until they bled, going, don't, you're hurting me.
A sure sign that a person was a witch was an apparition urging you to sign a book, the Devil's Book. Why was such evidence believed? If not the work of the devil, then what explanation is there for these bizarre events? Did some form of chemical poisoning trigger the mass hysteria? Or were the witch trials a simple matter of Puritan politics? Could what happened in 1692 somehow happen again in our supposedly more enlightened times? A team of experts will attempt to tell the true story of the Salem Witch Trials. Salem historian and archivist Richard Trask. Pharmacologist Nicholas Cozy. American historian Mary Beth Norton. And to bring the spirit of Salem back to 21st century America with a dramatic experiment in mass hypnosis, hypnotist John Pullum. To understand how 20 men and women could be convicted and executed without due process, we must first explore the climate of 17th century America.
You will hold your tongue!
These early settlers were religious fundamentalists. To them, the devil and his minions were a real and present threat and played a central role in their system of justice.
Spectral evidence is convincing to the court because what to us today is one of the most questionable aspects of the trials was, at the time of the original trials at least, possibly the most convincing part of the trials.
Cornell history professor Mary Beth Norton has studied thousands of original documents from the time of the witch trials. In them, she found repeated references to something no one before her had ever noticed.
What I discovered was that the New Englanders were totally consumed with fear of the Indian Wars.
In 1692, the Massachusetts colonists were in the middle of a brutal war with the Wabanaki Indians. This was an epic clash of cultures, the genesis of a war that would rage for another 200 years. To the Puritans, this was tantamount to a fight with the devil. And in the early days of the Indian Wars, victory was not assured.
The Puritans believed that the Indians were devil worshippers. They believed that before they arrived in America, America was the devil's territory, and so it was very easy for them to see the link between the threat from the Indians and the threat from the devil.
When the girls in Salem came down with these strange afflictions, many villagers must have felt that the war with Satan had opened up a new front.
The crisis began to spread when other girls in the community also began to have fits. Some of those girls were refugees from the main frontier, and they began to accuse people from the frontier who they believed to be collaborators with the Indians.
No story illustrates this motive better than the cruel demise of Reverend George Burroughs. He was an unconventional minister, one who had not even baptized his own children. He was the only man of the cloth to hang for witchcraft in 1692.
George Burroughs was looked upon as so atypical of what a good Puritan minister should be that the other ministers tended to want to gang up on him.
Norton believes that the real reason Burroughs was killed was that he opposed the war, so he was seen as a traitor to the cause.
They believed him explicitly to be in league with the devil. One of them declared that his specter had confessed to her that he had bewitched the soldiers who were fighting the Indians on the main frontier.
Burroughs did not even live in Salem. He hadn't set foot there for 9 years. How could young girls have known his face well enough to recognize his specter? Could war hysteria have led to a new kind of paranoia?
Come on, get up.
One that swept away any previous bounds of civilization?
It was not as though New Englanders had not believed in witches before, because they did. It was not as though they had never prosecuted witches before, because they had. But this was another order of magnitude altogether. And it was because of the Indian War.
Whatever lurked beneath the charges, the result was brutal and final. The team is on the hunt for an invisible invader, one that Puritan Salem could never have imagined. There's only one fact about the Salem Witch Trial that everyone agrees on, and that is that the hysteria began with the convulsions in a handful of teenage girls. These physical symptoms were the means that would justify terrible ends. But what could have sent the girls into such violent fits? The village doctor was sure this had to be the work of the devil. For 3 centuries, scientists and historians have puzzled over the cause of the girls' symptoms and the mayhem that followed.
It's almost like every new generation comes up with a theory. And the interesting thing culturally is the theory that one generation comes up with often tells more about that generation looking at history from their own perspective than it necessarily does about the past.
In the 19th century, the leading theory was that the girls faked the symptoms, and judges hanged witches so the state could grab their land. This theory, however, is not supported by the surviving documents.
As a matter of fact, although if you were a accused and convicted witch, your movable estate, the things you owned within your household, could be confiscated. Your real estate, your actual land, was not confiscated.
Archivist Richard Trask has found proof of this for 2 accused witches.
Both Giles Corey and John Proctor, while they're in prison, write wills in which they give their land to their children, and this is proved after they're dead and the children inherit.
Another theory imagines that the Salem girls, confined in their dark homes during the winter, may have become hysterical due to a chemical imbalance caused by a lack of sunlight.
Tell me how many, oh my goodness. There's about 14 foot candles in here, which is not much.
But there was nothing special about the homes and the climate of Salem Village. If lack of sunlight really were the cause, all of New England would have gone crazy during the winter. But there's another possibility, one that might have lurked unseen in their daily food. Ergot is a toxic fungus that infects rye. Inside it are chemicals related to LSD. This little-studied toxin causes tingling in the fingers, hallucinations and convulsions, symptoms similar to those reported in Salem.
The ergot alkaloids interact with neurotransmitter receptors in the brain. This can then lead to altered perceptions, altered signal processing, altered behavior.
Could the girls have been bewitched by these poisonous chemicals? To find out, the team contacted its resident pharmacologist, Dr. Nicholas Cozy. Rye was a major crop in Salem, but the ergot fungus needs certain conditions to flourish.
Ergot prefers wet summers followed by cold winters, and that seems to favor the spread of ergot the following year.
Those conditions were present in Salem during January and February of 1692, exactly when the girls started acting strangely. But there's a problem with the poisoned rye bread theory. How could the toxic chemicals have survived the baking process?
It's known that these alkaloids are very sensitive to heat. And so one might ask the question, well, if this bread is being baked, then wouldn't the heat inactivate these alkaloids?
Ergot was first suggested as a culprit 30 years ago, but to this date, no one has tested this basic question. Dr. Cozy is about to change that.
If the alkaloids don't survive the baking process, then that's a fairly strong argument against the ergot theory of the Salem witch episode.
Dr. Cozy will test 2 samples of rye bread, one with and one without the ergot fungus. Dr. Cozy has already ground raw ergot and set aside a small portion for one of our samples. He will now add the rest to half of the rye dough. Ergot is extremely toxic, so Dr. Cozy takes precautions while handling it.
It's important to keep the gloves on because it's a very poisonous substance. The ergot could possibly be absorbed. I don't want to take any chances.
Dr. Cozy now heats both samples to 400 degrees, the temperature at which bread in Salem would have been baked.
This is our regular rye bread, and this is the rye containing the ergot. The bread should be as dry as possible to be able to extract the alkaloids.
After the samples are dried, Dr. Cozy adds a solvent to extract any poisonous alkaloids that might be present.
You can see that some of the vapor is starting to collect into this region. Any substances that we've extracted from the flour will be left behind in this small round flask.
After 2 days, we're at the final stage of our experiment. Dr. Cozy adds a chemical to each extract that will turn blue if the suspect alkaloids are present. This is how it reacts to raw ergot. But what of the ergot that was baked in bread?
It's not as dark as the pure ergotamine, but clearly there is some bluish and purplish color formed, demonstrating that at least some of the alkaloids have survived the baking process.
To verify that the toxins are present, Cozy performs an additional test. Any suspect alkaloid will fluoresce bright purple when exposed to ultraviolet light. If the fungus has been completely destroyed, we won't see any purple under the UV lamp.
Oh yeah.
It does.
It glows, it's still there.
So this shows that the bread that was baked with the ergot in it still contains ergot alkaloids, even though the heat might have destroyed them. Clearly some of them have still survived.
The team's bread baking experiment has shown that the ergot fungus could survive high oven temperatures. But is ergot poisoning really what happened in Salem Village more than 300 years ago? Ergot constricts arteries, cutting off circulation to the extremities. This produces tingling sensations in the fingers and toes. If prolonged, it can cause gangrene.
If a person eats too much ergot, the tissue eventually will start to turn dark and then blacken, and if you bump into something, your hand will fall off.
While some of the girls' symptoms could easily fit the description of ergot poisoning, nothing resembling gangrene was ever seen.
Unless these people were consuming ergot on a continual basis, I wouldn't have expected the symptoms to last that long. And if they were consuming ergot over that period of time, I would have expected some of these other symptoms, such as the dry gangrene, which weren't present in Salem.
Trying to blame the terrifying events in Salem on a single biological factor simply doesn't work. While our investigation has shown that ergot poisoning may have inflicted some girls early on, perhaps even triggering the hysteria, ergot could not have gripped a whole town for nearly a year. The terror that filled Salem must have had another cause, one rooted not in biology, but somewhere in the recesses of the human mind. Could something that lies dormant inside us all lead to such outlandish fabrications? Are we capable of constructing our own supernatural fantasies under the right stimuli?
I'm like getting a really weird sensation. I actually have tears in my eyes.
The team is about to explore the hysteria by creating its own kind of controlled madness. In the winter of 1692, the Puritan community of Salem Village exploded when a handful of young girls fell prey to a mysterious malady. Soon, 20 people would be executed for the crime of witchcraft. The team has shown that poisoned dry grain could have caused the girls' convulsions and hallucinations. But how could an entire town have been gripped by their madness? How could a group of ordinary people convince themselves to set off on a vicious year-long witch hunt? Can these circumstances be duplicated in our allegedly more sophisticated times? The team decided to find out with an unusual experiment in group psychology. We're about to see whether we can make people believe in something that does not exist, something not unlike witchcraft, with the help of hypnotist John Pullum. We asked 7 volunteers to come to this dilapidated house in the middle of nowhere and told them that they were going to be part of a hypnosis experiment. Our director explains that hypnotist John Pullum claims he has psychic abilities and that something really bad happened in this house.
There actually was someone who was found buried in the wall.
The test is to see whether Pullum will pick up on the vibes, or so our cast thinks. The reality is that no one ever died here. This house is a movie set, and John has no psychic powers.
There's a camera up there, there's a camera up there, there's a camera here. All right.
John starts the experiment with his standard hypnosis routine.
For me, once again, take a deep breath in. Keep your eyes closed. Let your breath out.
And then pretends to pick up on the non-existent spirit.
Just give me 1 second here, if you could, please. Whenever you're ready.
I'm ready. And action.
Okay, give me like 30 more seconds if you could. Then we'll start.
This technique is known as the power of suggestion. If John the psychic is picking up on something, will our subjects pick up on something too?
This whole place is bad. I need time alone for 1 second.
John pushes the tension by staging an argument within earshot.
I know somebody's been killed here. You don't have to bullshit me. If this is... Give me a minute.
John,
Give me a minute.
Whoa.
If you knew this stuff already.
It's just, part of the show is
Did you get enough?
Their curiosity is piqued.
Okay, so,
If at any point you feel uncomfortable and want to stop this,
One by one, we ask them to go alone to the isolated spot. One that we're pretty sure is devoid of any psychic energy.
Anything at all, Andy?
I didn't get anything.
Nothing strange.
No.
Nothing at all. Okay.
No, I didn't.
Follow me.
Subject 1, no response. Trevor's pendulum is moving. He feels something.
Is it moving at all?
It was when the dogs were barking.
Was it when the dogs were barking and that was it?
And then, like, every time they would break, it would stop. I definitely heard trickling water from over to the left, back here someplace. It wasn't like running water, like a river. It was like a quick faucet.
Like Trevor, Bronwyn also picks up on a sensation to her left.
And I was sitting there, and I felt like a cold prick on my back. And I don't know, I tried to ignore it, you know, whatever, I wasn't sure what it is. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I should just be looking that way.
And I thought I heard a conversation, like two little kids talking in the bushes.
What?
Like
Really?
there's like a light
You
across
failed
the
to
way.
mention this before.
Yeah, for real, thanks.
The group seems to be feeding off one another. Either the spirit is getting stronger, or Bobby is succumbing to the power of suggestion.
Anything at all, Bobby?
Yeah, just my ears are popping.
Ears are popping?
Yeah.
Actually, just popping like an airplane.
Yeah, like quite a few times, not just like once. And it started moving and stuff or it was going side to side and then in circles. And then my ears started popping out there, popped like 4 or 5 times.
Yes is up and down. No is left and right. Are you a female? Are you female? Are you a female? Okay.
Yeah, I'm like getting a really weird sensation. I actually have tears in my eyes.
Okay.
John tries to nourish the seeds of belief.
You want to stop or are you all
No,
right?
I'm okay.
Is the spirit still in the house that hurt you? Is the spirit still in the house where we're all gathered that hurt you? Okay. So yes. Okay, let's go back.
Whoa, that was weird.
One more person. Grab your flashlight.
That was crazy.
We asked it, is that spirit still here that's in the house? Is the spirit that hurt you here in the house? And it started going the other way, back and forth for yes. And all of a sudden I just got like this huge feeling that overwhelmed me. My eyes like welled up and filled up with tears. And then that's where we stopped. But it was really, yeah.
I think it's pretty wild. I wish I was able to experience something like that.
Our last subject is ready for a spiritual experience.
Any sensations at all? Did it move at all?
No.
Didn't move at all? No sensations? Nothing?
He actually seems to feel guilty for not having experienced anything.
I didn't sense anything.
Really?
I
Nothing?
didn't move at all.
Did you hear anything or feel anything?
Nope.
How many people, by just raising your hands, feel that there was an energy, bad or good, some spirit in this exact location here? Raise your hand. Anybody?
Definitely.
So 3 here. How many felt anything out in the second location, out in the field?
Somewhere outside.
All 6 subjects now firmly believe in the presence of a spirit, whether they felt it directly or not.
There's something weird and strange about this general area.
In just 5 hours, we've created a group of people who believe they are in the presence of a spirit. Could this be similar to the way the Salem villagers came to believe so firmly in witchcraft?
How many people have ever heard of the Salem Witch Trials?
Yeah.
Tonight, we've kind of put you guys to the test. And I feel very sorry. I am John Pullum. I am a hypnotist. I don't see dead people. I don't channel dead spirits. This is a movie set.
Oh my God.
Your ears were popping. I don't know why. You were feeling scratches. You were feeling cold. It was cold out there.
She had tears.
And she had tears. Why was she trying? Because the spirits. I'm very happy to hear you guys laughing about it.
We'll be angry.
Wow.
The team has shown how easy it is to warp the minds of an isolated group of people. Isolated like the villagers in Salem were 300 years ago. But there is one question that still defies analysis. Where were the checks and balances that the English legal system should have provided? Salem was part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Checks and balances did exist that should have given the accused a fair hearing. But we know how fair their hearing was. What happened?
What we have here is Puritan gossip run amok. Tongues were wagging everywhere. Stories were being repeated. Rumors were being wildly exaggerated. Small bits of misbehavior got blown up into major aspects of witchcraft.
What was strange about the Salem trials was that the governor, Sir William Phipps, did not step in and put legal proceedings to an end, as he was bound to do by English law. But one team member found a hidden secret. As Cornell professor Mary Beth Norton scoured the archives, she found some unusual statements in the governor's letters back home.
Phipps wrote to England in October of 1692, claiming that he had been fighting the Indians on the Maine frontier all summer, and he had only recently returned, and at the time that he returned then, he had seen what was happening, and he dissolved the court and ended the trials. I was suspicious of this.
Professor Norton spent months fact-checking what Phipps said in his official correspondence and discovered he was lying.
I discovered that he had in fact been in Boston almost all summer, and furthermore, in London, I found the records that proved that he had met regularly with the judges of the court, who were also the members of his advisory council. So he had to have known everything that was going on, and he had to have been complicit in the trials.
Did you know Salem was made of two parts, Salem Village and Salem Town? Most of the people in Salem Village were farmers who wanted to be separate from Salem Town. They started their own church led by Reverend Samuel Parris. His daughter and niece were the first girls to accuse others of witchcraft.
You've been given all the information. Now it's your turn to discuss the questions. Take a moment to talk about the following.
Could Jamestown have survived without John Smith's leadership?
What were the advantages and disadvantages of living in a small colony?
We hope you've enjoyed this assignment discovery journey into American history, colonial America. If you'd like to learn more about what you've just seen, go online or check out these books at your local library.